everyone, and we're live here. So this is a very special, like, SpeakuP on tour. So it's not Monday, it's Tuesday here in Bali, Indonesia. And tonight we have a wonderful guest, Tyrone or Ty Williams. Tyrone Williams, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Excited to be here.
You know, and like there's a lot we're going to get into tonight, but a lot of you might know Ty as being, you know, NFT Bali, one of the originators here, I would say, in Bali, with a great community and under this collective solutions brand or business that you have. And we're going to dive into NFTs and the part they have to play in the future. But one of the things which I really, there's two things that I really want to dig into tonight with you. So one is, you know, you have this incredible parentage, right? Being like a mix of Indonesian and Australian as well. That's one. And we also share, not only we're very close in birthdays, mine's on the 13th of October and yours is 15th of October, Librans.
And we're meeting on my birthday again too. So.
Yeah, I know, and we're having a blockchain meeting on your birthday as well. But also, you know, I grew up in two children's homes growing up for about 18 years, and you had a difficult start as well.
Yeah, there was some interesting times in my life where went through homelessness. There was some interesting times where there was different fathers and all kinds of things. My mom had me very young. But she did her best, and a lot of love to her for sure. Yeah.
So let's start there. You know, so now you mentioned you're a mix of both Indonesian and Australian, and you know, so tell us about how you started. Let's start there. How did life start for you?
So I was born in Australia. My mom had me at 19. My father was 31, and my mom was one of those young women who really wanted a kid. Right, she really wanted a kid. I don't know if she knew what that really entailed, right? Especially with her career kind of skyrocketing 2 years later when I was 2. The story there was I was born in Australia, but by the time I was 2, she ran away to Singapore. She ran away to Singapore, and that's where she got picked up by MTV Asia, and all of a sudden she became the most famous Indonesian model of her time, even till this day, right? And so all of a sudden she was flying everywhere, every week, going to New York, going to London, going to Paris Fashion Week, and I'd be shipped over to Jakarta and taking care of the family in Jakarta. And so when nowadays I get to speak Indonesian quite fluently, as well as I speak English, and anybody in Bali, they kind of look at me and they go, how do you speak Indonesian? How long have you been here? I go, 10 months. They go, wow, you learn so fast. I go, yeah, you know, since childhood, actually, you know, I'm from Medan. And they're like, oh, wow, you know. And then for those who are familiar, you know, I'm technically Batak. Yeah. So then they try to speak Batak to me, and I have no idea, right? So, and so from there, you know, I was back and forth between Jakarta and Singapore, Jakarta and Singapore, Jakarta and Singapore. Until I started school a year late. My mom wanted me to start, you know, being in October. I don't know if you can relate, but either you're the youngest in school or your parents start you a year late and you're the oldest in school. Yeah. And so that's kind of how I started school. And I was never in the same school for more than 2 years, right? So I spent a year in Singapore, then I got sent to Australia in the country for half a year. Then I got sent back to Singapore for 2 years. Then I went to boarding school south of Sydney for 2 years, which was a lot of fun, by the way. I didn't want to go. I went kicking and screaming. I was like, no, I never want to go to a boarding school. You know, I want to live here and whatever. But it was probably one of the most joyful times of my life. Yeah. And then I thought I was going to stay in Australia.
Wasn't to be.
No. I thought, okay, these are my friends now for the next 8 years or whatever, high school, and then maybe I'll do university. I really wanted to be a psychologist, right? And so fast forward to finishing 2 days before I finished boarding school or high school, my mom calls me and goes, you're coming back to Singapore tomorrow. I didn't even finish technically, right? I had 2 more days. And so you're coming back to Singapore tomorrow. Your school term in Singapore starts in a week. I go, what? You know? And so there was a lot of changes throughout my life growing up. There was not much kind of stability, as you'd say. I was always making new friends. I was always the kid who was the new kid. I'd join school halfway through the year. I'd leave. You know, I'd have birthday parties I was supposed to go to, didn't get to go to, and
Were you always a tall kid? Like were you bullied when you're young? Because again, the mixed race ones, you know, you're right in the middle, are the ones that tend to be persecuted.
Great question. Haven't been asked that for actually ever, I think. So great question. Yeah, in Australia, I was the Asian. In Singapore, I was the Ang Mo, the white kid, right? And so I remember in most of the schools in Singapore, I would be one of 3 white kids out of 1,000 students, right? And so in terms of bullying, I don't know, I tend to always have a bit of a thick skin. I think that comes from my mom. You know, when you're in the limelight like my mom was, there's always media, articles, people trying to write things about her, and it would she'd pay zero attention, right? And so I think for a long time, even now as a founder, you know, we get to give advice to other up-and-coming founders, and I say to them, you know, if you're getting haters now, it's kind of like you've earned your stripes, right? If you're not getting haters, you're not really that big yet, right? And so all of that kind of experience, there was bullying in boarding school, there's bullying in every school, but it was really kind of like, oh, well, I guess I'm not really going to hang out with these guys, right?
So inside of you, right? Like, was there not a leading question at all? Just, again, the questions come through, not from. So, was there a defiance in you? Because I was bullied as well, right? For a certain period of time, then I fought back, and then afterwards I went the opposite way, and I became a bully, right? And then I got beaten up, and I stopped bullying and became like an introvert. I was like, what? You know, but I decided that it was better for me to hide my strength as opposed to put it out there for other people to have a go every time, right? And this was through various stages, but yeah, getting back to the original question that came through, you know, like, did you ever feel a defiance inside you? If you did, where do you think it came from?
Short answer, absolutely. I had a huge kind of rebel without a cause part to me. My teachers used to say that to me. They're like, you're such a rebel, but you don't have, like, there's no reason to be a rebel, right? You're just rebelling for the sake of rebelling. And for the longest time, I didn't know what that meant or even really paid any attention to it. I just kind of, if people told me what to do, if it's kind of like if someone told me what to do, I'd do the opposite. And that for the longest time kind of affected me in every way, including my career. Even when people had their best, like my best interest at heart, they'd go, hey, you know, you should consider doing ABC. And I'd go, and do XYZ, you know? And so it took me many years to realize that was actually just unprocessed trauma that I was still holding on to, right? And so where did it come from? You know, I'm a firm believer in childhood developmental theory. I'm a firm believer in trauma that gets stuck in the body, in your nervous system. And so my father and my mother both had really tough lives. So just being around that, whether, you know, I didn't get to actually really spend time with my father until I was 12. When I was in boarding school, I'd see him in the weekends. And then I lived with him for the first time in my life when I was 15.
How did that go?
During boarding school, it was amazing because I'd just see him once a month for a weekend, right? And he'd take me to the beach. He'd buy me anything I wanted. He'd let me play video games, and it was great. And then all of a sudden, you know, here's this. For a little context, my father was a tough man. Like he's my height, but where I'm kind of lean and thin, he's 110 kilos with abs, former bodybuilder, lots of gang affiliation. Did lots of crazy things, lots of crazy stories, the stories he would tell me. And so he initially we were like, yeah, you know, because it was a trick on my mom at the time. I wasn't supposed to be living with my father. I went on a holiday to Bali where my father had a lot of things going on. And at the end of the holiday, instead of going back to Singapore, I just went to Australia with him. My mom was so upset. And, you know, I still feel a little bit heartbroken about it these days for hurting her in that way. But turning it back around, the first 3-6 months were amazing, amazing. But then when you have the sort of man my father was, who was so used to people listening to him, who had never raised a child, suddenly had, I mean, think about a young man at 15, right? That's with the rebellious nature. All of a sudden, it was like, you got to do this. I'm like, why? You know, and it's like, but every story he would tell me was about violence, women, drugs. And so what did I do? Violence, women, drugs. And he absolutely hated it, right? And so I distinctly remember my father would walk outside every half an hour for a cigarette. And by this time, he'd had a new daughter. And he didn't want any of that around her. But I was doing the same things he was. And he could not accept it. And so, you know, I learned a lot of things from my father, how to talk to women, how to defend myself. I went, you know, my first or second day in this new school. For context as well, I ended up in a really tough neighborhood school because part of the ways my mom tried to get me back was to not allow me to get into any of the good schools. I had scholarship offers. I had, you know, straight A's. But she called each and every one of the schools and told them I was a problem child. Thinking, you know, in hindsight now, she was thinking that if I couldn't get into a good school, I'd come back to Singapore. And so I ended up in this really tough school where, you know, I'd never seen anything like it. So all the schools I'd been to was, you know, button-up shirts and short hair and everything, and typically all boys. And all of a sudden there was girls with piercings and tattoos and people dealing drugs next to the principal's office. And on day 2, one of the girls, the popular girls, was trying to talk to me, right, and a lot. And she was showing me around school, and the boys hated it. End of day 2, first fights were picked. Came home, my dad's like, "What? No, we're going to teach you how to fight." You know, so so within the next sort of 2-3 weeks, got into a lot of fights. One of those typical stories where you got to hit the biggest bully until they leave you alone, right? And so,
you know, like this, you know, what do we call it? It's this when you do the opposite of what you're told. Like you mentioned before, right? I was in school, button-up shirt, short hair. I see you, button-down shirt, long hair, right? Contrarian, that's the word. Yes. You know, but it's interesting because, again, like, you know, most people know you as this guy who's like this NFT kind of master. You know, built a big community, is massive in the space, but I don't believe they understand you. Right, just a personal thing, and you know, like the first moment that I saw you and I met you and we had a chat, I get all sorts of things, right? Because we're all EQ evolved, especially those which had troublesome childhoods. I believe that you become very EQ savvy early because you figure out, is this person a threat? What have they got? Da, 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 da. And you quickly learn to sum people up very, very quickly. Not so you're always right, but you learn to be very accurate, right?
absolutely.
So I noticed all these things about you from the get-go, you know, and the fact that, yeah, you know, you didn't finish school or da, da, da. Again, clearly to me, you're a very sharp, intelligent guy who's very perceptive. That's what I get straight away. So here's the thing, you know, like if I asked you, you know, like what was the toughest experience you had growing up and how did that kind of arm you, I use that word deliberately, arm you for the world and the life that you have now? What would it be?
There's a few, but I think being homeless in Singapore was a very interesting experience. Being homeless in Australia was one thing. But being homeless in Singapore, where, you know, typically as an expat kid, you're seen as, you know, wealthy, well off, whatever. All of a sudden to begging for $2 to buy McDonald's, sleeping at the McDonald's, sleeping at the Starbucks. For those of you who don't know who are in Singapore, Starbucks will let you sleep all night and wake you up at 7 a.m. on the dot and kick you out, right? So it was perfect. It was really comfortable. It was like this couch, actually. I could sleep here any day of the week, right? And so now, if I couple having been through homelessness and door-to-door sales, nothing phases me. You know, people complain about the smallest things, and sometimes I feel like they just like complaining. You know, whether it's for the intention or or to feel sorry for themselves or whatever. Nothing's quite as hard as that was, right? And so, showering at the are you familiar much with Singapore? You know the HDB blocks? Typically, every HDB block will have a tap down the bottom. So in my bag, I had about 3 pairs of underwear, 1 pair of shorts, 2 shirts, and a hose. And that's how I would shower. I'd stick my hose into these taps and just have a quick shower and move on. And that was it. And so now when I get, you know, when I'm trying to close a deal, they say no. Okay, on to the next one, right? Or even with NFT Bali, if we go back to that for a second, you know, we raised all our money in ETH. And at the time, we didn't really have much of a team to support us, right? We had amazing local partners, but everything that was done on our end, from like raising the money, finding sponsors, all of that, then managing the portfolio, was done by me. Now, that's all well and good until you start actually running the event for 31 days straight, and you're up in the mornings, you're still trying to run the business as well, because that doesn't go away. And then ETH goes from like 4,000 to 1,800. And all the money we had raised, we were like 40% in profit. We raised more than we needed. We were like, okay, we're going to give this to charity. This is going to be great. We didn't need to pay ourselves. We didn't want to. It was proof of concept, right? Towards the end of it, we thought we were going to have $20,000 extra to give to a homelessness cause, to build local homes. And all of a sudden, we came out the other end with like $400 instead of 20 grand. And I went, oh, okay, you know. But whenever anybody else heard the story, they go, oh man, that must have been so hard. It must have been terrible. You must have felt so shitty. I was like, it happens. I learned, you know. And often, one of my mentors used to tell me, he goes, some days you earn, some days you learn. And I go, okay, that was a learning day. And the more you learn, the more you earn anyway. So, yeah, to answer the question, I think homelessness and 100% commission door-to-door sales was the 2 hardest things. And I could talk about many other things, but those 2 stand out the most.
How long were you homeless for?
In Singapore, about 3.5, 4 months. And then in Australia, about a year. I came to Australia. I didn't finish my Singapore conscription. I was supposed to do 2 years. Got really depressed. Found a way to get out of the country. Was let out for a weekend. Never went back. And I thought it'd be so much easier in Australia. I thought I'd be able to just get a job waiting tables or anything. But the job market's really tough when you don't have any experience, any network, any education or qualifications. I must have handed out 600 resumes, didn't get work for a whole year. And the work that I did get during that, 3 or 4 opportunities for about a week, they didn't pay me. And so it got worse and worse and worse. I was borrowing money from all the wrong kinds of people. They were starting to come back to me, and they were like, hey, you said a month, you said 3 months, where is it? They were getting aggressive. It was all kind of getting pretty tough.
Tell us about depression.
It was like I had this vision, right? Early in the conversation, I wanted to be a psychologist, right? I was told that life was about success. I now understand it's about joy. I was told that success, especially growing up in Singapore schools, success looks like you go to school, you go to university, you get a good job, that whole route, right? And we've all heard that before. And then being kicked out of home, going homeless, realizing I wasn't going to go to uni. And my whole plan was done. I realized that if I wanted to go back to school, after the army and all that, I would be finishing high school at 22. High school, or 23. So 5 years later, after everybody else. Basically, so what depression looked like to me was, why bother? Right? Why keep going? Why even try to find anything to enjoy myself? Because that would be loving myself, right? There were multiple occasions of considering suicide. There was a couple of feeble attempts. I look back at it, I'm like, let's be real. There was a part deep down inside me that was like, nah, this life thing's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't try hard enough. I failed at that too, right? Yeah.
So there's three words that come in. One is psychoanalysis. The other one is how did you get out of it? Not a word, but for how did you find your way out of depression? And then the final one is where were your parents? What was going on there?
So there's many cycles of this. Yeah. The one that comes to mind is probably the last one. Yeah. When I'd come back to Australia and I was experiencing that. My father and I weren't really talking because that 2 years we lived with him turned out horribly. Yeah, right. And so eventually he sent me back to my mum, and it was real violent. We weren't talking. Every time we tried to talk or I'd try to reach out to him, it would end up with him screaming at me on the phone, if not in person. And so he was out of the picture. My mom was also out of the picture because I'd run away from Singapore again, this time from the army. And I kind of, my mom had me with my father. Then she had my younger brother Finn with a guy named Brian, who was a lovely man. And then now she was married to a banker named Desmond, and they've got a daughter together. And so the story I told myself was, there'd been occasions where my stepfather Desmond had been quite abusive to me as well. And I would go to my mom and I'd say, my Des has just hit me. And she goes, I remember this is probably one of my most vivid memories. She was sitting on her laptop in bed. She looks up at me and she goes, you probably deserved it. Yeah. And we looked back at her computer. And so to me, that was a huge betrayal. And at the time, I was like, it didn't make sense. But in hindsight, there was a few phases. But in hindsight, the first time I kind of came to a realization was like, my mom's an aging model. What's she going to do if she leaves this man? Right? What kind of power dynamic does that have in the relationship? So I started to forgive him more. And to get back to the original question, which was what helped me get out of that, I think this leads to why I do what I do now. It was people. My life's always been about people. I think always will be about people. I was exposed to these gorgeous human beings who had, whether it was similar life experiences or the ability to empathize enough and see where I was at and kind of give me a way out, right? I was then introduced to things like Tony Robbins. I was introduced to meditation, yoga, and the feeling of progress, right? I think that was one of the biggest things. Progress equals fulfillment. And so that's what turned it all around.
Got it. When did you first start to take responsibility for what was happening to you? 'Cause that's coming through as something that is quite important.
What's coming through me now is two ways. There's the first answer is immediately, meaning it was my fault my parents were like that. Because as kids, that's what we kind of tend to do, to feel, right? It's like if our parents are abusive, it's our fault. If our parents aren't doing, if we're not good enough for our parents, that's what's happening to us. So on one side, I was immediately responsible and full of blame. But I wanted to push it back on them. So I was full of blame probably until I'm 29 now, probably until 7 years ago, about 22, right? This is after I'd done my sales, door-to-door sales, and been exposed to a wonderful man, Daniel Tonkin, who till to this day we still talk and help each other out.
And I'll just get you just to switch the air conditioning off for a sec. I think it might come on to the sound. So then the other word that comes up is So what irritates you about people? What do you find most irritating? What gets under your skin the most?
I'm going to put a caveat here first.
Caveat away.
People can't accept in others what they can't accept in themselves. Having learnt that now and seeing it being applied in my life, there's very little. Typically, I'll get irritated with someone, but then a week later, and I'll kind of like mull on it for a while, right? A week later, I realize they're just teaching me a lesson where, we are technically all one, right? My spiritual beliefs are that. And so if they're in my life presenting in that way, it's just mirroring an aspect of me that I'm either shutting down or not allowing through. And so I feel like I'm in a strange part of my life in the past 2 or 3 years where I'm evolving very quickly. I used to not be able to accept people who wouldn't work hard. I'd be like, what's wrong with you? Well, do you think people are just going to serve it to you on a platter? Right? But the lesson in that one was I would never accept anything from someone unless I'd worked for it. If someone wanted to help me or gift me or reward me just for being me, I'd push it away as if it was, I'm not a charity case, And then moving forward, it was like...
Defiance.
Yeah. And moving forward after that, it was like, well, I couldn't accept anybody who wasn't self-aware, thinking I was, the Buddha already, And then I realized there was some serious blind spots. I was like, okay, thank you for that lesson again, right? And so at the moment, at present, I think, and I just had thank you for this conversation. I just had a great one because at the moment, it's hard for me to accept when someone wants to take it all for themselves, right? Because for me, even in a great conversation I had last night, a few investors that we have a mutual, and they were told about me. They apparently flew to Bali just to meet me. These 3 wildly successful guys from Singapore and Shanghai, and we had a great time. And they were like, "So what's how do we work with you? It's clear you can help us, but like, how do we, what's the agreement?" If you make all these introductions for us and it turns into great business, what? I go, if those introductions turn into something great for you, I've made the introduction, yes, but they're helping you. My only ask is that you then help them. And they're like, oh, no, we're willing to pay. We're prepared to pay. So this conversation now is making me realize there's a part of me that still kind of goes, you don't need to pay me because of whatever reason. Perhaps I'm undervaluing myself, right? So, that's most recently, that's what annoys me about people trying to take it all for themselves. They're a little bit less collaborative. They're a little bit less about sharing, as much as they might say they are. If people say one thing and do another thing, that's probably at the moment what I'm working on.
Firstly, brother, I knew you'd be like this. I just want to acknowledge you for being straight out honest. I get it, and I feel you, right? So, for a while, I struggled with self-worth of a sort. So this is, you mentioned it before about valuing yourself, right? And there's a whole bunch of things which I do with people, introductions, this, that, and the other. Yeah. Nothing in it for me, right? Yet we all need the money. I need the money, right? But no. Now, by the way, for those of you watching, there's a few people which have seen this recently within me. Is like, you want to do this? There's a charge for it, right? So it's at the end of the day, people like you, people like me, people maybe who are watching, we're great at connecting people, connecting ideas and projects and all the rest of that, right? For the upliftment and fulfillment of mankind including women, by the way, not just mankind, right? So let's say human beings, make it easier. But I struggled with it big time, wanting to please everybody. And I realized that had a lot to do with how I grew up, the children's homes, and the self-worth that I placed on myself. Did a clubhouse room this morning, Tuesday, yep. And one guy said, I'm not sure if it's true, I guess it would be, but I don't know, said, look, he just did $1 billion exit some years back, right? And now he helps people around. And he's super valuing of his time. So usually it's like $500 an hour, blah, 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 blah. And he goes, if people are 2 minutes late, I'm out the door. 2 minutes, not 10 minutes. No, 2 minutes. And that's only if you have a good reason for being late, right? So he says, I just don't work with people, right? So he puts a very serious value on his time. So if I said to you, Ty, like, what has been your history, with valuing yourself in that way? And what were some of the major challenges that you faced, if you have overcome them or not?
So I'll preface this with a little bit of a belief of mine. I think anybody who's a little bit of an overachiever or has a little bit of workaholism or, any free time they're working, typically speaking, a large majority of them have self-worth issues, right? Because they're out trying to kind of almost prove to themselves that they're worthy of the value that they're receiving. I think the biggest challenge for me was understanding that there is a voice in my head that wasn't my own. And it was the voice of my father, the voice of my mother, and the things that they would say, which were, again, very little to do with me and much more to do with the trauma of their own lives. Understanding that isn't the truth was probably the biggest challenge. And that's an ever-evolving process even to this day because, even yesterday's example of those people coming here, it was like, wow, hang on a second. If there's these filthy, wealthy, multi-millionaires, super successful, and they're coming to hang out with me, and they're trying to get my advice, and they're trying to get my resources and connections. Hang on a second. If everybody else is valuing me, maybe it's that defiance thing again. Maybe I'm defying them and saying, oh, I don't, I'm not going to think the same way as you. Just because you value me doesn't mean I should, right? So I think that's definitely a part of it. And also, I think there's a lesson for me that was really powerful was we met those people who are kind of virtue signaling when there's a couple types. There's people who signal they're wealthy and they're really proud of it, and that's a front, right? And then on the flip side, there's people who virtue signal as if they're better than those people because they're like, no, I don't want money. People who want money are X, Y, Z, right? And so when I had that realization that it's not about whether you have lots of money or whether you're almost disgusted by people who have money, in neither case are you better than anybody else, right? You're human. We're all just human, and we're going through life learning lessons, and we evolve or we repeat. And so for me, understanding that accepting money isn't dirty, that was probably the second one as well.
There's so much here, but I'll go with what comes up. So what was coming up was, what is your relationship with money, right? I'll preface this one. So, and we all do it in our own way, right? But sometimes we don't realize that we do because it's an unconscious thing or subconscious thing. So you just said these three guys came over and they were, quote, filthy rich.
Interesting. I'm programming myself there. I like that. That's cool. I like it. My conscious belief, not my subconscious one, my conscious belief is that money just amplifies what's already there. So, especially in crypto and Web3, you'll notice there's a lot of first-time rich people who've never had money before, and all of a sudden they're the most arrogant know-it-alls you've ever met, right? And you're just like, really? You're 22 years old, you know? And I've been 22, thinking I know everything, but I didn't have that much money at the time. Now these guys have like 1 million followers, and they're spending like crazy, and they feel like they don't need to take advice from anybody. You know, everybody's trying to get them kind of. I'm like, it's just, again, it's just people, right? It's just they're just going through their journey, and eventually we learn or we repeat, right? We evolve or we repeat. And so I think for me, what money is just amplification of what's already there. Like if I tried to run NFT Bali by myself with no money, no sponsorship, it would have been just like a bunch of people sitting in a cafe for 31 days and getting really bored, right? But we had this great idea, and we were able to get all our partners to sponsor, which allowed us to make it free for end user, which meant we could go to the nicest bars, nicest restaurants, nicest co-working spaces, you know, and do really cool things in an environment that inspires and is fun. And so I like that though, the filthy thing. I don't know, but then again, if we can have some fun with this,
always having fun.
Is filthy a bad thing? I feel like we all like to get a little bit dirty. There's a great book. I don't know if you've read it. It's in my top 3 most recommended books. So it's called Existential Kink, is the title.
Yeah, I haven't read it. Existential Kink.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'll give you a little bit of a synopsis or context for this. It's kind of revolves around shadow work. Are you familiar with shadow work? Yeah, cool. So if we talk about light work, and for anybody who doesn't know what light work is kind of things that amplify the light within us, right? So yoga, eating clean, exercise, meditation, that all amplifies the light, okay? But just in real life, if you amplify the light, the shadows get darker by contrast. Yeah. And typically people, and these are words from the book, typically people are kind of like looking up at the light and just only want to pay attention to the light, not even noticing that they're standing in a pile of shit. Yeah. And so in this book, the concept you learn is that if God created everything, isn't he kind of kinky? If he's all powerful, right? And people say this all the time, and they question religion, right? And I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. If he had the power to just create an all beautiful world and everything, why did he create such pain as well? Yeah. Murder, rape, poverty, all these kinds of stuff. Because on one side, you can enjoy that. And you see that across society. There are people who go all the way deep down the dark end. There are people who ignore it, but then they love to watch it on TV. Because whatever you repress just gets stronger. And so for me, that book was phenomenally powerful, and I highly recommend it to everybody.
Wow. Existential Kink. Got it. You know, now for those of you probably watching saying, hey, but this guy is NFT Bali. Why are you not talking about NFTs? Why are you going deep into the back? Because that's what's coming up, and that's how we roll. But coming into this NFT space, you know, so actually before we get there, you know, like, if you look back now, right, at the life that you had before, and if there was one thing that you could have said to your younger self, you know, about whatever comes up for you now, what would have that one thing out of the many, what would that have been? Kind of like advice to your younger self.
You're worthy of love. That's the first one, for sure. I think it's the most powerful one.
Thank you, my brother. Love that. Cool. So now, NFTs. So what I can see and feel from your background is just this whole, the word duplicitous comes up. I don't know why. Anyway, but what I see is this, you know, this preparation for a wild ride. right? Having changing schools, moving there, the violence and all the other dark stuff and the light stuff as well. The fact that people were there to salvage and save and rescue you at various points. This push me, pull you, contrarian view. This finding out people are wanting to take things from you and dealing with that whichever way you want to deal with it. Hardworking, not hardworking, judgment, no judgment, learning about yourself. Anthony Robbins, door-to-door sales, that just this idea of just understanding that someone says no, it's a numbers game. It's a next, it's a next, it's a next, it's a next, it's a next. Resiliency, this this philosophy of just realizing that I will never give up. Reaching points of suicide and not trying too hard, right? But still, it's a cry for help. And then, at some point, and the word is coming in, it's almost like this, like this, whoa, that's a bit of a strong word. Like, it's like the death of the ego. And what I mean by that is not maybe the way that people think I mean it, but it's like, okay, at one point, there were 2 staff members in the orphanage where I grew up. And, I, at this point, was thinking that Cowboys and Indians, right? So the word is cognitive dissonance. There you go. Cowboys and Indians, right? So I'm there thinking, okay, the Cowboys are the good guys, the Indians are the bad guys. Why? Because that's what I'm told, that's what I see. Sure. That's what the media and the world is telling me. Okay, mirror that onto what I'm about to tell you. 2 members of staff who were not together. One was married, the guy with a few kids, and the woman wasn't married, she was single. Now, as it turns out, they were having an affair. We met his wife and his kids, used to come to the children's home. At one point, when they were always on duty together, we would hear things from the upstairs bedroom. So one night, we all crept up there, like I don't know, Sherlock Holmes or something. And as we got closer, we would hear more. And what we could hear were 2 people having sex, but we didn't know what that was. At the time, we were young.
How old were you?
Young, right? So eventually, we push open the door and we'd catch them in the act. Okay, that wasn't the shocking thing, though. That was shocking in itself. The shocking thing was what happened next, which was, they both denied it. Then when it became apparent that we realized that, hey, we saw you, then he said, well, you want to tell my wife and break us up as a family? So it was this emotional blackmail. But that wasn't the worst still, right? So we would all walk around with this, shall I tell her, shall I not? If I do, I'm going to be responsible for them breaking up. Is that what I want? No. So we were living in this cognitive dissonance. We were living in this, like, I don't know what to do. Okay, now here's a worse part. So I don't remember how it happened, but we all became aware that his wife knew already.
Wow.
And decided to do nothing about it. Why? For the same reason as what your mother chose, which was like, well, he's my husband. He provides for us, right? At the end of the day, I'm not happy that he's having this affair under my nose, but what am I going to do? So in the same way as the Cowboys and Indians were like, I realized that it's not the way that I was told. So it was the death of the ego. It was the death of like the fairy tale, not the ego. It's more like fairy tale, right? And it was
the innocence.
Yeah, death of innocence, right? Now we're gonna go to Web3. We're gonna go to NFTs right after this. But when did you feel that? If you did feel it, when was that?
I've never been asked this question before, and I'm trying not to say I don't know, because as soon as you say I don't know, your mind stops thinking. So, probably 15, 16, living with my father. Yeah. It was, the more I tried to emulate him and then get punished for it, it just didn't make sense. So probably then.
Got it. And part of this is, which I don't need to tell you, but I'd love to share it with you, is that, so what comes up in these conversations is, it's like the clock, like 1 to 12, like let's say from 1 to 2, this is what I know that I know. and my name, where I'm from, where I live, all the rest of that. And then from 2 to say 3 or 2 to 4, this is what I know that I don't know. I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that, da 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 da. But then from 4 to 12 is what I don't know that I don't know. And this sort of stuff that's hidden in our subconscious and comes up to play when we start to think in that area. So these questions don't come from, they come through, but that's what it's doing. Like, so in the days that follow, things come up, and I know you're open to the process. So, but I just want to be straight up. Right?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome, man. So NFTs, right? So why did you get into them? Like, what was it? I can see all the reasons, like I said before, of why you as a person, right? Your generosity, you as a person, resiliency, you as a person having to deal with all of these difficult situations that would break a lot of people, but you're like, well, I've been through a lot worse, right? And having to keep on moving and traveling around and meeting new people and making more friendships and all this other stuff, but what keeps you in the NFT community?
You're going to hear me say this a lot, the people.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
It's for sure it's the people. It's always going to be the people, I think. If the people weren't quality people, I wouldn't be here in the first place and I wouldn't stay. And so every single day I meet phenomenal human beings, and I get to learn so much from them, and I get to do such cool things with them. Mm-hmm. It's like this it's on our website too, do cool things with cool people, right?
Yeah.
So
love it. And so the future, right? And we're getting a little bit more into NFT, but the future, like if I asked you, okay, so you have the collective solution, right? You have NFT Bali and NFT Bali Week, 31 days, which Tomorrow Gallery, of course, me and Tomorrow Gallery played a part in, and happy to play a part in that. And Tina was doing the organizing, and obviously
Tina's amazing.
She's amazing, isn't she? Yeah. So if you're in Bali, Augustina RD, check her out. One of the best event organizers on the island, for sure, and a wonderful person. So, but like, what kind of future would you like to see? So people from the outside looking in, maybe don't even know what an NFT is. They've heard of it, but don't know what it is. So probably the first thing would be, a quick definition of that. But, we know the market's gone up, it's gone down, da 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 da. Where do you see NFTs in the future, and why are you so bullish on them?
We've just come from the era of competition. Like, if I want to succeed, I got to compete and I got to beat everybody else out, right, in my market. What we're building and creating right now is really the era of collaboration, right? And if I use an artist as an example, this is where we started. The first ever thing we did was with an artist. And so an artist typically will need to do the art, then they'll need to do social media, and then they need to do sales. And those are three very different skills, right? And a lot of extremely talented artists are never discovered because they don't do those other two things. And yes, there's, Web 2 ways of doing this, like profit sharing and everything, but it's quite, there's a lot of red tape, there's legal things you got to do and whatever, and agreements. But now with Web 3, it's very, very simple for people to create a collaborative mission, whether it's as simple as getting someone's art out there. If you're doing the art, I can go do the sales, and it can all be put in the contract for us to be paid equally when that happens. Now you don't have to do anything else but create art. And I can just do what I'm good at, sales, right? And so that was where we started. And I mean, to go back to the definition of what an NFT is, it's just a non-fungible token, right? And to go further back again, what is crypto? It's just a distributed, decentralized ledger. And so we'll go, that's the first thing. What is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is just a way to transact internationally, locally, whatever, without an intermediary, and make it super simple. I don't need a bank account. It's super simple to create a wallet. Anybody can do it. And there's this great example, I think happened during Crypto Week. Someone told me about a Latin American woman living in the States who could not get a bank account, but she could use a Bitcoin ATM and send money back home, no problem, right? So it removes the middleman. That's the first thing. And then smart contracts get really interesting because anything that you might have needed a lawyer for or some kind of agreement or someone to enforce it can be enforced by code and can be a lot cheaper, right? Anything that you could think about can be applied to smart contracts. Okay, great. So now you start to think about the implications to real estate. You think about, in Web 2, for someone to buy real estate, they'd need to have a lump sum to put the deposit down by themselves, and a lot of people just never get there. They don't have $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to put that deposit down, but they do have 100, and they do have 100 friends. Now those 100 friends can put that deposit down and own it through that DAO, right? And so this is where it gets really interesting, that it's platforms building where you're going to be as simple as like creating a Facebook account. You'll be able to create a Facebook, an account, and then you can go $100 of real estate in Bali. And you go, which area? You go, this one. Great, cool. Now you own $100 worth of real estate. You'll see asset appreciation that typically is not available to a lot of people in the market, right? So that's the second piece. But where NFTs get really interesting is unique, verifiable assets that are owned by you. The implications for gaming are insane. The implications for art, digital art, is wonderful.
Going to gaming, as you said, the opportunity for gaming. What do you mean?
So mindful that a lot of gamers don't like NFTs at the moment in the first place. I think that largely comes from a little bit of a misunderstanding of what it's meant to do. It's not meant to, ask you for more money. No, it's like if you're playing a game right now. I don't know if you're a gamer, but I spent a large part of my childhood growing up playing video games. You can buy like all these in-app game things, right? Like skins and a new sword or whatever, right? Now, typically, if you buy all these things, you might spend $100, you might spend $1,000, you might spend more. Some people spend ridiculous amounts of money. They don't actually own the thing. They own it in their account, but if that game shuts down, right, or the game developer stops doing anything with that game, that's it, it's over. But now, thanks to NFTs, you actually own the thing, and it doesn't matter what the game developer does. You can take that out and trade it legally. A lot of games you try, they'll say that they have, games will say, I can already sell my things. I'm like, well, yeah, but in terms and conditions of the game, you're not supposed to do that, and you get found out, you get banned, right? So now this is kind of like a, quote unquote, a legal way where instead of having a one-time purchase, even as the game company, instead of a one-time sale, when that person who might, play this style of the game, every game you can play, you might be the farmer, the hunter, the whatever, right? You might decide you want to play something else. You can now trade that. You don't no longer need it. You can on-sell it to someone else, and as the game developer, you're going to get a portion of the transaction fees every time it's on-sold. So for business, for your game company, it's even better. For the person buying the thing from you, it's better because they can recoup some of their funds and try something else. Plenty of times I've wanted to try something else but couldn't afford the other thing, so I had to keep playing what I was playing. And so, the biggest problem in Web3 right now is everybody's trying to get adoption, right? And a lot of really smart people, far smarter than me, are betting a lot of money that the next billion users are going to come from gaming. And it's right, because it's the most obvious use case for NFTs. Right? You can do lots of things, and I'm looking forward to the day, and hopefully we can create it with our own collection. But instead of an NFT that's just for digital things and just for online things, but for real world value. I don't like to use the word utility. You'll hear that a lot in Web3, but that's a little bit, neither here nor there. But value is clear. Everybody understands value. And how do we define value? This makes my life more convenient. This makes me more money. This helps me grow. This gives me status. This gives me access. This value's always been the same, always will be the same for a human being. I want an NFT that not only does it give me a loyalty program at my favorite cafe, but it allows me access to my favorite beach club. It gives me a discount at Tropical Nomad to come and work. It should be interoperable. And that's really the future. The future of not just blockchains, but businesses is interoperability. A super easy way to identify and agree that if you own businesses and we have a partnership, you now just put my contract into all your businesses. And anybody who's part of, who's a customer from me can get benefits from you now too. It's really like, as John F. Kennedy used to say, I think he'd love Web3, by the way. It's really about a rising tide that lifts all boats, right?
I like that. Yeah. Very nice. And so we speak about real world adoption a lot. And what would you say then are the biggest, maybe we choose one, the biggest challenge right now to that? What would it be?
The user experience, user interface, right? It's currently developers building developer things for developers, right? And then even for someone, even for me, the first time I sent ETH or Ethereum to anybody else or even to myself, for lack of a better term, I was shitting myself, right? I was like, am I about to lose $3,500 just if I get one letter wrong, right? And so the user experience isn't intuitive enough. It's all a little bit scary, right? But the truth is as well, there are powers that be that have an incentive to keep crypto down. And there is a lot of misinformation out there. And so for most people who live a busy life, they might have kids, they might have a 9-to-5, they might work in the evenings as well, then they have no time to go and learn these things. The truth is, you're going to need to learn, spend 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 hours to feel you can navigate this space right now. It's not always going to be the case. It's going to be as simple as it is to make a Zoom call one day, right? People right now, they're talking about, what blockchain are you on, or where are you going to build your company? I don't ask you, if I'm on a Zoom call with you, I don't ask who your internet provider is, right? In the future, it's just going to be things that are working, right? And so what's the biggest obstacle is we just need to build more things that people need to use, right?
Got it. Yeah. And then look, so we're coming towards the end, but give yourself a plug. So Collective Solutions, Bali NFT. So what are you working on in the next 2 or 3 months?
A lot of people joke that the Collective was one of the first groups of its kind. We were up around maybe 16 months ago, but we're the last to actually launch our own collection, right? So we're actually launching it now in the next week or so. And where most people are doing, like a 10,000 collection or a 5,000 collection or whatever, we understand that if you don't know who's in your community, you can't serve them. So we're not selling it to the public. Anybody watching this can't actually buy it, right? It's by invitation and application only for members who are already part of the Collective. And so what this allows is it allows them to own a piece of what we do moving forward. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I guess a little bit of a definition of what the Collective is. The Collective started, again, it's always about the people, right? So when everybody else started collecting NFTs, when the apes were minting, all that kind of stuff, I just started collecting quality people, right? And putting them together. And so what does the Collective do? The Collective connects founders with capital, advisory services, access to top talent if they're hiring, and access to distribution networks. That's it. Really, what else does a founder need, right? Those are the 4 things. And so as an extension of that, that's everything we do online. NFT Bali is just a natural next step. Let's do it offline. Let's meet in person in a beautiful island like Bali, right? So that's the second piece. And then over the next 3 months, we're actually building something called the Signal School. We have something called the Signal, which is an internal thing where we provide high-quality research. We do deep dives in projects, but then in 3 paragraphs, you understand whether you want to look deeper or not. And that's it. We provide that kind of on a once every 2 days, 3 days, we give them some information. The Signal School will have a mastermind for Web 2 entrepreneurs or business owners. We're very specific. Again, we're always going to be working on founders because founders will have a trickle-down effect on their teams and then their customers. And so we're going to help founders transition into Web 3. And yeah, so we're putting out a bunch of podcasts actually with some of these brilliant minds because we've had all these amazing conversations internally. And we realized, hang on a second, the market would really would benefit from this. So we started recording them, releasing them. And we just started last month, and we've got some of the biggest names in NFTs already in the first 6 episodes. Maybe we should have you on as well one day.
Hey, brother, for you, I can be available. Huh? On that note, we're in Bali, Indonesia, and friend Oki, who you know well as well, he was the one who reminded me of this book, Regional Advantage, and it kind of goes into, like, what are the fundamental building blocks to a thriving ecosystem? And there's 3, which we've now added a 4th one in. So one is availability of capital, availability of talent, and availability of projects. But now number 4 is about leadership, right? So if you look at those 4 things, right? Capital, talent, leadership, and projects, where would you say the community in Bali is for each one?
It doesn't seem like there's a shortage of money.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like there's a shortage of projects.
Yeah.
There could be maybe a little bit more, a little bit more innovative. So projects, capital, leadership, and what was the
Talent.
Talent. There's definitely a lot of talent, though perhaps we would benefit from continuing to upskill that talent.
Yeah.
I've had people come from Shanghai and Singapore, and they go, yeah, there's a lot of enthusiasm, but not much expertise almost. There's a little bit, it's still amateur, and that's fine. We all start somewhere, right? So there's a lot of all of them. And I think there's great leaders like yourself who are pulling people together. But I think as you alluded to in one of the group chats, there is a little bit of a faction system going on right now, and I don't know what that is. I don't know, I think it comes back down to that people can't accept what they can't accept in others, what they can't accept in themselves. So, there's been multiple occasions in my personal experience where I've been doing my best to be as helpful as possible to as much of a degree as possible, and just receiving a lot of negative energies back. And I'm like, okay, and after enough exposure to that, you kind of go, well, why should I put myself around that energy when I can go spend time with all these beautiful, positive people? Right, and so...
we had a clubhouse room this morning. Dr. Sujata, PhD from the US, was the topic that came up, the topics come through, not from, was, how to deal with difficult people. So on that topic, so there's a school of thought. There's two main reasons that everything stems from. So one is values, and 2 is personality. So why is it that people don't get along? Why is it that people have difficult people? Why is it that people, fall into this trap of, finger pointing or, nattering or talking behind their back or whatever it might be, is through those 2 things not being understood. So if I am talking to somebody else and my values are, work hard, my values are, always tell the truth. If that person's coming from a different set of values, then we miss each other.
Yeah.
Right? And then I become maybe dictatorial, or I become, very opinionated about what that person is. Right? And then the faction comes. Yeah. The other way is personality, right? So I'm an introverted extrovert. I have both. Right, last night's show on SpeakuP Monday was an extrovert, right? For whichever reason, with a great guy, Thomas from Bali Fab Fest, like a maker's space, incredible. So, but personality, for some people, when they see an extrovert in this group chat, right? We've got one person, won't mention any names, said, "Look, make sure you don't invite this person into this group." I'm like, wow, okay. And he wasn't the only one, right? And again, this person comes with a lot of energy, a lot of weight, a lot of heat. So there's a personality thing in there, So what I've learned over the years is that, and you are the same, is that I am a bridge, right? So in my family tree, Jamaican Maroon, a long time back, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, they're all there. And, there's so many other things that have happened over my life, sure. And I know what I'm here to do, right? To bridge the gap, and that's what I love doing, and that's what I'll continue to do. Now, which brings
You and
me,
me both.
thank you. I know. Which brings me to what I realized earlier on was that, I said at the beginning, that this, this great mix you have, right? Indonesian, Australian, and I've asked you hardly anything about it. So there's two questions, and then we'll probably close this session off. Like the first question then would be, we're in Indonesia, we're in the Web3 community. Like what would you love to see happen within that Web3 community to what corresponds to Indonesian participation?
Bali's culture is I've never seen anything like it, and not even just Bali, Indonesia in general, right? And I've got family in Jakarta, Bandung, Surabaya, everywhere, and so to be able to empower more of that to get out into the world, I think will be good, not just for all the islands, the thousands of islands, but for the world. I think the rest of the world can learn a lot from the kindness, the beauty, the ability to look out for one another that the Indonesians do. And this might be slightly unrelated, but I think it's just coming to my mind for a reason. But I think Menengu, the owner of Zin, he said something to me which I loved. He goes, Tyrone, it's really, really easy to help the 1% make another 10,000 a month, another 100,000 a month. It's really easy. I can do that in my sleep. I'm like, okay, well, I can probably learn some things from you, but it's much harder to get 2 million people from below the poverty line up to experience more and have their needs met. And when I started thinking about that, right, it's like, it's true, and it's much harder, but it's also a lot more fulfilling. It's a lot more meaningful. And I think that's why I'm trying to get as much more involved with local Indonesian founders as well. I'm trying to get much more involved with non-profit organizations that are trying to make an impact for, again, here's the theme again, the homelessness, the people, and just giving them a shot. Because, and here's another thing I think that comes up real quick is that when I was in sales, in 100% commission only sales, newer members who would join and I was training, we'd start at 9 a.m. after traveling 2 hours to get there. By 10 a.m., if they hadn't made a sale, they'd start to what we called lose their attitude, right? They'd get upset. And then I came on a trip to Bali, and there was a street salesman, a street vendor, selling tissue with the biggest smile on his face. He's going, not door to door, he was going car to car while people were in transit. That's even harder. It didn't matter what you said. He would smile at you anyway. And when you think about the margins he must be making on a packet of tissues, to live so joyfully, I kind of want to just make sure that if we're going to do anything with Web3, we need to be able to do it in a way where the education is readily available. That's why I love what Republic Rupiah is doing. I want to get so much more involved in that. To be able to empower, not because there's any language disparity or anything, but to give that same equal opportunity to everybody. I think the world will be astounded by the creativity, the work ethic, the ability to create value in other people's lives that the Indonesians have. Give them the opportunity, we're all going to be better off for it.
So Speak Up Monday, 4 years old, roughly, over 300 episodes, 313 or something, and Indonesian, expat, foreigner, entrepreneur, social impact. Really 10, 12 different industries, has blessed me with so much because I understand the power of listening, right? And asking questions that come through, not from. And here's the thing, some of the things which I love about being here in Indonesia, living in Bali, is that it's the philosophies, right? We've spoken about Trihita Kanana. We've spoken about Takwamasi. We've spoken about Tri Mandala. Then most people know now Bhinneka Tunggal Ika. Some people have studied Pancasila.
I don't know. What is
Right?
that?
Yeah,
What is that?
Yeah, Pancasila is the 5 guiding principles of Indonesia. And so what I find is that the container that Indonesia has is like, it's a container for the future when you bring those elements together. Founding principles, Trihita Karana, and so on, right? So that's the first thing. So the container is set. Not always perfect. Everyone's got challenges, but it's been living here in Bali, and you alluded to it before about 5 different religions living, everyone respected on the calendar, everyone acknowledges those days and gives those days wholeheartedly. This 2 ley lines that intersect in Bali, making it the heart chakra of the world. Like, again, doing what I do, I get to really see and understand so much in so many different pockets and corners of Indonesia, including Bali. And, so when I look at Web3, when I look at blockchain, those quintessential elements of it, the transparency, the trust in that sense, this decentralized notion. I don't think everything could be decentralized, but there's something that
still need customer support, right?
Yeah,
like people get really upset about no customer support. I'm like, well,
yeah, it's like I'm not the whole way there with decentralization.
Agreed.
So what I see is an enormous potential. And the thing that I want to allude to right now is that, so it's been 4 years of doing these shows. What I've noticed of late is this understanding from Indonesia itself that it is a power, and it doesn't need to ask people's permission. It doesn't need to have a whole bunch of consultants coming here telling them what to do. It doesn't need all of these things, which some foreigners are still stuck in this colonialistic mentality and don't really seem to understand that is long gone. Like when you look at people like Sandiago, well, let's go to the top. You look at the history of Indonesia and you look at Jokowi and what he's done and what he continues to do. And I've met many of his staff who revere him so much. And even those which are not even in the same party, I don't know, there's a country in the world that has that. And then you look at the whole team. Again, I mentioned his name before, but what he's doing, Sandiago, is phenomenal. Like, I've met some of his deputies and people at his right hands and all this other stuff. But in each kind of area, what you see is enormous understanding of, we can do this, right? And we don't need your help. Like, and sure, I still, even though my wife is Indonesian, we have 2 kids, Indonesian passport holders in Australian and soon English, we work that out, right? I still believe I'm a guest, and I'm happy with that. I've got no problem with it, and happy to be that way. But, again, like what I see, and I'm getting there, is that not only has it woken up that it's a giant. There's a lady, Raquel, on one of the episodes we did, and she said, Rob, when the rich scream, wealth whispers. Indonesia is a wealthy country. And that still stayed with me. And this is 6 months ago that I did that interview. But to me, like, what I'm excited about is that there are foreigners, because I'm a bridge, as I said, so are you. And where I'm at with it is that, how do we bring the people of Indonesia together with expats, foreigners like me, like you, well, you're not really because you're both, right, to knowledge share, to co-elevate, to co-create on projects that uplift and inspire humanity, but are also sustainable. And that's where that Trihita Karana comes in, because it's, again, human to God, right? How does this impact traditions, culture, customs? Boom. How does it impact the environment, sustainability, regenerative systems and practices? And how does it create prosperity, human to human? So these 3 things together make a conscious ecosystem, a conscious business, a conscious individual, right? And I love that. So what I see is a tremendous opportunity that is now, right, for those who are open and wise enough to see it and to grasp it. So then coming back to you, who again, you got a foot in each world, Indonesian, Australian. Like, what is it that you would like to see, and how can we get there, and what must we overcome to reach there?
So what would I like to see? Yeah. What do we need to get there, and what must we overcome? Yeah. Let's see if this works. I'm going to try this. You ever do you pay much attention when you're on the bike, just to the kind of faces going by? Yeah. It's wild. Sometimes you're going by. It's a local guy. It's a local girl. It's a Russian girl. It's a dude that's overweight with a mustache, but he looks like he had such a story. And then there's purple hair. And then there's a really fit person. And then there's a tattooed guy, and he's topless. And every person is so different on the road. But then typically you go into a location, like a restaurant or something, it'll be kind of, again, it's almost like these cliques, right? It's like, this is where the white people go. There's the road, if you're going to Seminyak from Canggu, you go past Toko Crypto, and then you're going through, there's the two bars on the other side of the road, and it's pumping, and it's just locals. And they look like they're having so much fun. Yeah. You'll never see a white person there. But then you go to some of the bars, the other bars where the expats are going, and it's just not quite as fun. What I'd like to see is much more commingling, a lot more people doing things together. And I don't think it's anything to do with, it's not fueled by any kind of negative intention. I think it's just a lack of awareness, right? So what do we need to get there? I think, again, we need to kind of give people an easy opportunity. People kind of scared of the things they don't know, right? So it's just like, just give people a little bit more of an understanding. It's like, hey, you can go to these bars too. You're going to have a time of your life. The first time Bella partied with Indonesians at the Utopia family event here in Bali after CoinFest, she had so much fun. She couldn't keep up with the drinking, but she had so much fun. And she was like, wow, we got to do that more. I'm like, yeah, we got to spend time with my people, right? And so, what challenges do we need to... I think it's just people like you, like me, inviting people to come to a nice location and just introducing them. It's one of our podcast guests, Zeneca, he's one of the thought leaders in the space for NFTs and Web3 in general. He likes to say, and I've adopted it now, do the unscalable. Right? So in this case specifically, I know Indonesians. I know expats from all over the world. I'm just going to keep putting them together. I'm going to have a party, bring them, introduce them, make them shake hands, show them how much they have in common. One introduction at a time. That's how I'm going to do it.
Love it, man. Love it. Last one for you. So just think of something, if there's anything that you'd like to say. You've got about 2 minutes. Anything that you'd like to say to kind of see us out. It might be reiterating something that you've done already. It can be plugging what you do. No problem there. Just plug away. All good. Or it might be something completely different. And look, as we're both Librans, right? So there's a lady here.
Today, actually?
What's that?
It's your birthday actually today?
On Thursday. Oh,
right.
Yeah. So there's a lady called Debbie Franks, who's a astrologer mixed with lots of other things. She was out here recently. She was Lady Diana's official astrologer for 8 years. And she gave me a reading, and it was really interesting what came up. But the thing that I want to get to is that, so a lot of people think the Librans are balanced, right? It's not the case. We seek balance. Now, it's very subtle, but it's different, but it's very subtle, So we seek the balance. And so any country which I've been in, when I was in Australia, I worked with Aboriginals. Anyway, but we seek the balance, right? So what I hear in this whole conversation that we've been having is this seeking of the balance. in others, in our environment, in ourselves, and so on, which I think is beautiful. So I just want to acknowledge that. I just want to acknowledge you for being the guy you are, man. And just as I said in the beginning, like pretty much from the get-go, I see you. Because I see you in me and me in you and all the rest of that good stuff. And I'm glad we're able to do this. We're here in the podcast room at Tropical Nomad. I've got Sister IU over there and Brother Guzman over there and Itchy somewhere else. So I just want to thank Tropical Nomad. We do it here on a Monday, as you know, in the other room, which is crazy cool. And then we get to do this, this like SpeakuP on tour, where we have just one-on-one, keep it tight. And this is how SpeakuP Monday started, actually. It was one-on-one, keeping it tight and going deep, right? There it's a little bit it's different, but still the same. People inspire people and unity and diversity. So look, next Monday, Natalie, one of our great friends, is doing a panel of women. And so just make sure you look out for that. But that one's phenomenal. She's an incredible lady. She's got 3 other wonderful guests, and they're talking about, how as being a woman, are you able to find your path and have success in whichever area it is that you want to have that success. So they're going to be talking about that. That's SpeakuP Monday, next Monday, 6 o'clock, always here on a Monday, and just come out there, be in the audience. It's free, no RSVP needed, no membership needed, F&B menu throughout, and it's free to enter. Just follow SpeakuP Monday throughout Instagram, Facebook, and probably YouTube. Look out for that. And trying to do anything else. No, I feel blessed to live in Bali. Love to my beautiful wife, Marina, and our kids, if you're watching. Love you guys big time, you know that already. And to Mother Bali and Indonesia for welcoming us and keeping us safe, right? And allowing us as well to grow in incredible ways. So, brother Ty, over to you. Thank you, my man, for coming in. I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
Absolute pleasure. You've been fantastic. You're an inspiration to us all. And you used the word blessed. You feel blessed, and I guess that's the last thing I'll say. When you're blessed, be a blessing. And this is for everybody out there, and for us as a constant reminder, right? Just to thank you. More, please. Just bless and bless and bless. That's it. I got nothing else.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate you.
See you next time. Thank you very much for tuning in. Bye for now.